Kicking off the list at number 10, The Man of Steel, Superman. Superman Batman Volume 1, Issue 44. The Strange Favor storyline begins with a movie shoot. How exciting, I wonder what they're filming. Well, they're filming a Superman Batman movie called World's Finest, which has a pretty good ring to it. I'm already intrigued. It feels like Tropic Thunder almost at first. These other guys are playing these superheroes. Batman's being played by a former Bond actor in that universe, Jason Wish, and he's going for it. His eyes are all watery. He's explaining this made up origin, and Superman offside, like the Superman and the Batman, are watching them film from afar, and Batman isn't really into this whole idea. He doesn't like how they don't know his true story, and now they're just making stuff up. But Superman reassures them that it's only because they're interested in the mysterious Bat. Out of nowhere, Livewire comes in, who's almost as evil as LimeWire. Almost. And then she takes Jason as hostage, demanding that she receives half of his $12 million pay, which is a pretty big chunk of money. Robert Pattinson's only getting $5 million for the next Batman, but he's getting 20 for Batman 2, so it's okay. So the Superman flies down and intervenes, and then he gets surprised when the prop kryptonite on set gets blasted with electricity and in turn explodes, leaving pieces of Superman's only weakness stuck in his face. I love how they have real kryptonite on set. That's good, that's commitment. It's like when they use real bones instead of props in the original Poltergeist movie. What could possibly go wrong, right? Number 9, the Wasp. We'll get the appetite going right off the bat here. Okay, Janet Van Dyne, aka the Wasp, first appeared in comics in Tales to Astonish, issue 44. Genetically engineered by Dr. Hank Pym, Ant-Man, with the help of Pym particles and biosynthetic wings, now Janet was one of the founding members of the Avengers. Not too shabby. She could generate bioelectric blasts from her hand, knocking down even the fiercest of foes. But when the Blob gets a hold of her in the Ultimatum storyline, her sting just wouldn't cut it. The story comes from the Ultimates, which is already just a darker take on all of our characters and all those stories, and in it we see Earth's mightiest meeting their violent end. As for the Wasp, during the flood in New York City, she ended up being separated from the team, and when they finally found her, it was too late. She had become a midnight snack. Hank decides to get payback in a similar manner. Giant Man then grabs the Blob and Ozzy Osbournes his head right off. Payback is gross, but necessary. And before we continue on with this list, let's brighten the mood a little bit. Maybe go and hit that thumbs up. I don't know, get some spirits back to normal. Also, it helps the channel out so much. You're the best. Thank you so much. Back to this dark list. Number 8, Batman. Coming from the 1993 Batman Nightfall storyline, we get to meet Bane in a terrifying way. He literally broke Batman. The Beast started by making Batman's worst day come to life as he freed every villain in Arkham Asylum, so now Batman's gotta try and round up all those psychopaths, which is already exhausting, and Batman's weaker now, mentally and physically. And when Bane goes to the Batcave because yes, he knows Batman's secret identity, he beats Bruce down, and when the moment is right, he lifts the Caped Crusader above his head and drops him down onto his knee, breaking his back. Now this was a huge moment in the comics. When Batman goes down for the count, the mantle was then passed along to Azrael. And we just broke down a bunch of alternate versions of Batman in the last week or two, so make sure you go and check out one of those 3 lists as well after you're done here. Batman has had quite the run in comics. Interesting time. Number 7, Spider-Man. Coming in hot from the Amazing Spider-Man 700.3, The Black Lodge Part 1. We open in Queens, New York. It's past 2 in the morning. Peter is regretting having seconds at Aunt May's. He's just trying to go home, but now he's got to go face to face with Firebrand. Peter even realizes that already this fight has gone on for too long. Usually this would be a piece of cake, but Peter ate too much cake. He was actually too full. He was tired. Now this is tedious. And then when Firebrand gets a hold of Peter's neck, it really starts to hurt. Firebrand unloads everything that he has, and then he sees Peter's suit start to melt and then rip apart. It's actually really brutal and pretty gory. By the time help arrives, he's unrecognizable. The cleanup crew literally thinks he's another supervillain. They're like, get him out of here, this burnt, crispy man. Firebrand 2.0, whoever you are, bye. Peter received 3rd-degree burns on 80% of his body. Aunt May, where's the aloe? We need some aloe stat. Number 6, the Hulk. Mark Millar's Old Man Logan begins in Volume 3 of Wolverine at issue 66, and this is now a future where supervillains have won. Sads. Hulk and She-Hulk had kids. Weird. The Hulklings, who would beat the crap out of you if you didn't pay rent, because basically everybody had their own territory, so Logan had to pay up. Hawkeye, who is also much older and now also blind, needed Logan's assistance to get across the country and deliver a secret package. This was a way Logan can make some of that rent money, so perfect, let's do it. Now when they get back from their trip, things have progressed in an awful way. Hulk Gang took out Logan's entire family because Well, they were bored, of course. They're a little messed up in the head if you didn't already piece that together. So Logan dishes out some payback. No more games, no more talking. Logan's here to now get this done. Logan gets Banner right through the old chest plate, but we all know what happens next. He freaks out. He hulks out, rather, and then he eats Logan. If you can't beat him, eat him, I guess. Now you'd think this would for sure be the end of it, but that's when Logan pops out from inside Banner. After what's gonna happen to Wolverine near the end of this list, it's nice to see him come out on top, or just come out of a body in general, that's fun. Number 5, Jason Todd. Of course this is going to be on the list. A Death in the Family is a 4-part storyline written by Jim Starlin and published in 1988. It contains perhaps one of the biggest, darkest moments in DC Comics history because we see the Joker beat the second Robin, Jason Todd. And when I say beat him, I mean he beat him with a crowbar and then used an explosive for good measure. He was a goner, for sure. And also, it was your parents' fault. Pause this video, go yell at them, come back, like it, click play. Yeah, DC left it up to readers how this story ends for Robin. Nowadays, fans are coming together on Twitter to see director cuts of movies that haven't even been released yet. So it's a little better now. We have a bit more of a squad. The actual beatdown, of course, is awful, but emotionally the Joker destroys the boy Wonder as well. He used Jason Todd's birth mother, he blackmailed her in order to get closer to Jason, and it worked. Betrayed by his birth mother, and then the Joker too killed her. Double whammy, triple whammy. 4 whammies, I don't know, all the whammies. Number 4, Green Arrow. Green Lantern, Green Arrow, issue 85. Let's talk about it. The first few pages, we see Oliver Queen walking at night trying to get home when all of a sudden some punks, some fools try and rob him. Now this is a day in the park for most of our superheroes. Now it's not like he was tired or maybe he didn't see it coming like Peter, he ate too much cake. He actually was in a bad mood. He had lady troubles, he was ready to fight. He was like, okay, I'm looking for this. You guys picked the wrong guy, let's go. He's like getting warmed up. He was feeling good. And then a guy pulled out a crossbow, because you know, all those thugs that carry crossbows through the city, and then Ollie gets shot right through the shoulder with an arrow. Irony at its finest. Number 3, Green Lantern. Now this one comes from Justice League issue 5. It's been referred to as the Punch since. In this comic, Batman comes in to take over the Justice League International, and Guy Gardner, Green Lantern, doesn't share the same enthusiasm as the rest of the team. For more than one issue, he makes it very clear that he doesn't like this new leader. So naturally, this conflict was growing, and although Batman was obviously a better fit for the role, he challenged Batman to a fight without the use of his power ring, and then Batman proceeded to knock him out with one punch. Of course, he's Batman, and without the ring, you're just a guy. You're just a regular Guy Gardner. Blue Beetle even jumped up. He got pumped, and he started yelling, one punch, one punch, one punch, just adding insult to injury, literally. This is a great moment, an even greater lesson, but Green Lantern getting knocked out by a human punch shouldn't have happened in the first place. Don't start fights you can't win without the only thing that makes you win those fights. I don't know, just my advice. Number 2, Martian Manhunter. In Final Crisis 1, John Jones' Martian Manhunter gets trapped in a prison. See, he originally went there undercover as John Jones in his human form and would regularly report back to Batman. That's when the villains decided to break free and then he was left behind. It's not looking good at this point, because Human Flame had now given the villain Libra instructions to kill Martian Manhunter. So Libra went and he did so. He stabbed Martian Manhunter with a staff right in front of the entire staff, the entire secret society of supervillains, and then upon his death he returned back to his Martian form, and in his final moments he still managed to send that message back to the Justice League. Not even death will stop this guy's plans. The Justice League held his funeral on his home planet, Mars, with Superman giving the eulogy. His final moments were expanded on in the Final Crisis Requiem storyline, teaching us more about his homeworld and the inhabitants of it. You can find this in Justice League Volume 2 in issues 6 and 7. And finally, number 1, my personal favorite, Wolverine. I mentioned Wolverine getting something bad. This is it. Now we're going to talk about it. This next one comes from Punisher Volume 6, Issue 17, appropriately titled Aim Low, written by Garth Ennis. So we find Wolverine with his face, well, without a face. His face is gone at this point. He got his face blown off by the Punisher, and you'd think that would be pretty bad, but it of course gets so much worse. Frank Castle fixes his aim a little bit lower and then pulls the trigger, reassuring Logan that they'll grow back. Frank was trying to get Wolverine out of the way, and this put him down for a bit, definitely, but he's still not out for the count just yet. Never turn your back on the knucklehead. Wolverine is literally crawling towards the Punisher now. He's like, shoot me, bomb me, cut me up, I don't care, I'm just gonna keep coming at you. Well, it's kinda hard to move when there's a steamroller on top of you, no? The fact that he did it slowly too, starting with the feet and then slowly moving it up to his head and then putting it in park when it was on his head, I can't even fathom what this would feel like. I can't pull a hangnail some days. Like a steamroller, what kind of Austin Powers way to go out is that?
Coming in number 10, we've got The Thing. The beefiest, brawniest, burliest, surliest member of the Fantastic Four doesn't often lose in a battle of might. Wits could be another thing, and when it comes to speed and timing, things could end poorly too. But on most days, there isn't going to be anyone stronger than Benjamin Grimm. After being hit with some wild cosmic rays, his body underwent some crazy changes. His skin became rough and rock-like, taking on an orangey hue and becoming near impenetrable. His toughness and density are through the roof, making him very hard to hurt. Along with his inbuilt armor, he also has a whole lot of additional wicked physical traits. Based on strength alone, he's one of the most powerful characters going. In fact, most consider him a consistent and classic rival to the Hulk. Incredible stamina, durability, and sensory adaptation round out his legendary bulk, and he technically is immortal if he chose not to revert to his human form every year. He doesn't age, can't really get hurt, and packs quite a wallop. In fact, after standing toe-to-toe with the mighty Green Mutant many times, the Thing has indeed definitively won against the Hulk before. So how does he manage to lose a fight? Well, you can't win them all. When the Hulk heads to New York to get revenge on the Avengers, the Fantastic Four is waiting for him. Ben Grimm hops out in front and takes on the Hulk, and the battle is pretty evenly matched. However, at the end of the massively destructive fight, the Hulk reigns supreme. The Thing collapses, totally wiped, and the Hulk is able to move right along. Dang, and we thought that incredible stamina would go on forever. Maybe next time, right? Coming in number 9, we've got Mark Grayson. This one's a bit of a bummer, don't you think? A burgeoning young hero getting his ass beat by his own father. The father that seemed to promise to protect the Earth from any threat? Such is the life of a Viltrumite. Mark Grayson, aka Invincible, was just getting a handle on his powers. He'd realized how strong he truly could be, but his dad, Omni-Man, was definitely stronger. But that's not too big a deal, right? Papa Nolan is gonna stick around and defend the Earth too, yeah? Teach Mark the ways of being a hero, maybe hit some sweet dance moves to a song called Hot Milk. Wrong. Omni-Man is actually evil and looking to conquer as many planets as possible. Damn, dude. When Mark attempts to stop him after he kills a plethora of supers, Omni-Man lays an absolute beatdown on his son. It is super brutal, my goodness. Coming in number 8, we've got John Stewart. One of Earth's Green Lanterns, John Stewart is blessed with all the powers one would expect. As leader of the Green Lantern Corps and a member of its honor guard, he's quite the formidable fighter. Renowned for his sharpshooting and building skills, not many can hold a candle to this hero. However, he isn't perfect, and all of the powers in the world won't help you if you get too cocky. The classic tale of human hubris. Nobody's immune to it, no way. While working with Martian Manhunter to contain the anti-life equation, they realized they'd need to save the planet of Xanshi. The folks there were slowly being poisoned, and to make matters worse, the planet was laden with bombs that were set to blow. John, thinking that he was super powerful and unstoppable, decided to fly an injured Martian Manhunter to safety before heading down solo. Guess what though? The bombs were yellow. You know, the one color that renders a Green Lantern useless. So all he could do was get the hell out of Dodge, leaving Xanshi to an explosive doom. Damn. Coming in number 7, we've got Nightcrawler. Most folks like living life without a gaping hole in their chest, but most folks also can't teleport around in the blink of an eye. It's a tough world for a teleporting superhero, especially one with a drive to help as many people as possible. Nightcrawler, being a genuine hero, puts his life on the line and pays the price. In a future where there are no more mutants thanks to a lovely spell cast by Scarlet Witch, only one hope remains. Incidentally, this hope comes in the form of a mutant girl named Hope. Subtle. When Bastion, a super advanced Sentinel from the future, comes back to kill Hope, Nightcrawler gets in his way. Unfortunately, in the way also means that the Sentinel's arm is right through Nightcrawler's chest. Oops. In a last-ditch effort to keep Hope alive, Nightcrawler uses all of his strength to teleport her away from the murderous machine. Once he completes that task, he runs out of fuel and dies. Coming in number 6, we've got Eric O'Grady, and this one is painful. Eric O'Grady, one of the least lovable Ant-Men, lived his life like a bit of a loser. However, he was still indeed Ant-Man, with all of the powers that came along with the title. Plenty of potential there, that's for sure. And even though he was no saint in life, he was definitely a hero in death. Somehow a child fell into the clutches of the Descendants, a group of artificially intelligent super cyborgs. They may look human and act human, but they definitely aren't. And this is proven when they delve deep into the depths of cruelty and stomp poor Eric to death. He saved the kid, but was unable to come away with his own life. Ouch. After being reduced to a bloody pulp, the cyborgs also took his likeness and created a new Ant-Man, one that would infiltrate his old team and betray them at a critical junction. Coming in number 5, we've got Shazam. What? Shazam? The closest thing to Superman we've got without getting Superman. Who's gonna beat him in a fight? I suppose you can't necessarily count on him to be at 100% mental fortitude though, considering that underneath all of that ancient magic and musculature, there is a 15-year-old with a strong heart. There's a lot that goes on in a teenager's brain that might cause him to make some bad decisions, you know? Like in the case of Shazam versus Harley Quinn, for example. Quinn tosses a hammer at Shazam, who seems to think it's gonna be an easy fight. He has the strength and reflexes to deal with that hammer no problem. And here's the thing, he keeps talking to Quinn after he catches the hammer and doesn't really do anything with the wayward weapon. So what happens next? The hammer explodes. Oh boy. Shazam, you could've won the fight, but you didn't. Coming in number 4, we've got Iron Man. Oh Tony, if only you were better at getting along with people. All throughout Iron Man's history, Tony Stark has been a bit insufferable. Although he's a super genius with a heart of, well, maybe not gold, but something like it, he tends to rub people the wrong way. So even if he manages to defeat plenty of supervillains and keep the world safe, he's still got some other stuff to contend with. From time to time, he'll do something that really makes another hero mad, and that hero might decide to fight Iron Man. And in a lot of these cases, Iron Man doesn't fare all that well. Like, he's lost to pretty much every mainline Avenger at some point, from Spider-Man to the Hulk to Thor to even Black Widow. It's tough when you paint such a big target on your back, but I'm sure he understands. Coming in number 3, we've got Jean Grey. To be immensely powerful. Too bad the world isn't fair and something can always go wrong. Take Jean Grey for example. Telekinetic and telepathic powers beyond compare, a connection with the powerful cosmic entity the Phoenix, a bunch of awesome mutant pals. What could be better? Well, not experiencing a terrifying magnetic aneurysm, I guess. Yeah, that did not turn out too well for poor Jean Grey. After discovering that their new member Zorn was actually Magneto in disguise, the X-Men jumped into action. This did not prevent Magneto from releasing an insane wave of magnetic energy, absolutely wrecking Jean's brain though. Unfortunately, there was nothing she could do about it and she perished almost instantly. Yikes. Coming in number 2, we've got Captain America. Now the tables have turned a little. We talked about Iron Man having a tough time stacking up against his longtime pals a little earlier, now is his time to shine. In Civil War, we see Captain America and Iron Man get into a bit of a kerfuffle, and by a bit of a kerfuffle I do mean brutal brawl with all sorts of stuff on the line. It's a crazy fight with plenty of killer moments and momentum swings, but in the end, Tony Stark comes out on top. Damn, Cap. And finally at number 1, we've got Silver Surfer. Not the power cosmic. That's absolutely wild. This Herald of Galactus is one of the most powerful ones going, and has strength beyond compare. He can harness immense energy from the universe and channel it in different ways. On most days, barring insane divine intervention or other heroes becoming ludicrously overpowered, he's unstoppable, a force to be reckoned with. However, there have been entities that fought with Silver Surfer and came out on top. Doesn't happen often, but it isn't totally impossible. There's the wild bit from Marvel Zombies that sees this cosmic power get taken down, and there are even a few non-zombie runs where he's taken down a peg. Adam Warlock knocked him out to prevent Silver Surfer from joining a fight against Thanos. Oh, and at some point Deadpool gained the powers granted to Heralds of Galactus too, which was very interesting. Made for a good fight, that's for sure. So even the most powerful beings can be defeated from time to time, eh?
Number 10. Darkseid is called. In the Snyder cut of the DCEU film Justice League, we learn that the heroes don't actually save the day. In the original version of the tale, they kinda lose and are too late to prevent the Mother Box from calling out to Darkseid, who arrives on Earth. The Mother Box explodes, seemingly killing our heroes. However, there is one hope left. While technically in this timeline they lose, Barry Allen, aka The Flash, manages to use his superpowers to race beyond the speed of light, turning back time and giving everyone a second chance. Also showcasing how much of a powerhouse the hero can be, and making him one of the most powerful superheroes on the team in this version of the story. So although for a moment they lost, The Flash gives the team a second chance, and this time they do manage to save the day, with Cyborg preventing the Mother Boxes from coming together and reaching out across the cosmos with Superman's help, and Aquaman and Wonder Woman defeating Steppenwolf, who dies while being sent back through the portal to Darkseid on Apocalypse. But that first time around, they all likely died. Number 9. Captain Britain vs. Iska. The Ten of Swords tournament, or the Otherworld tournament, was not what many expected, especially when it came to how poorly our friends over on Krakowa did. I mean, after all, they were supposed to be the heroes heroes in this event, as they faced off against their villainous mutant brethren of Arakko, who were also under the influence of the Amenthi demons led by Annihilation. And it all started with Krakowa's ability to lose hard on that very first battle in this story. I don't know about you, but I was pretty shook after reading that first fight when I was reading this as it was all coming out. The fight went down between Captain Britain, Betsy Braddock, representing Krakowa, and Iska the Unbeaten, a champion of Arakko. The fight lasted 4 pages, and Betsy was swiftly and easily defeated by Iska, with both her sword and herself being shattered into pieces. And friends, before I move on to this next spot, if you are loving this list and you want to show some support for us over on another platform, head on over to Facebook where you can give us a like, a follow. We really appreciate it when you do, and we have lots of exclusive content coming your way over there, so yes. Number 8. A League of One. Superheroes don't always lose to supervillains in the comics. In the case of the JLA story A League of One, this time around the League is actually defeated by one of their own, Wonder Woman. However, Wonder Woman doesn't do this to actually cause them harm or kill them, but simply to get them out of the way. This is because the League is facing a dragon, and there's basically a prophecy surrounding that fight that it will cost the band of heroes their lives. Wonder Woman not only manages to defeat the League, even disposing of Superman, who she weakens and then sends on a mission to save the others who she's left in danger, but also does manage to sidestep her doomed fate. Sort of. Wonder Woman was willing to die in the League's place, hoping to spare the rest of the team, but in taking on the dragon by herself, she manages to actually avoid dying. At least dying permanently. She dies momentarily, but is revived by Superman, who arrives just in time to bring her back from the brink of death by giving her life-saving CPR. So she died, but only for a minute. Number 7. Emperor Doom. In this story, Dr. Doom succeeds in taking over the world by using the powers of the Purple Man, who he keeps as his prisoner. This might sound like a lot to put on Purple Man, aka Zebediah Killgrave, whose powers aren't generally depicted as being capable of working on a global scale. However, Doom manages to boost Purple Man's power while also taking it for himself by trapping him within a large psychoprism prison. Surprisingly, Earth actually does pretty well under the rule of Doom. Hunger, crime, and war are pretty much all eradicated under his rule, but at the high cost, of course, of free will of every individual on the planet. In the end, Doom isn't defeated, but actually chooses to relinquish control, becoming bored of the monotony of ruling without any opposition. Number 6. Tower of Babel. In the Tower of Babel event, Ra's al Ghul manages to use Batman's own intel and files on the Justice League to defeat them. No. Really. Batman, being the prepared and paranoid man that he is, basically is revealed to have kept files on each member of the Justice League, noting their weaknesses and also containing contingency plans for how to best defeat them should they ever turn to the side of evil. Ra's gains access to Batman's systems and is able to retrieve these detailed files and plans via his daughter Talia. He uses this information to take on and defeat all members of the Justice League, even managing to seemingly distract Batman by robbing the graves of his parents. In the end, the Justice League recover and win the day, but they are none too pleased with Batman, whose secret intel in essence almost single-handedly allowed Al Ghul to destroy the whole team. Number 5. Days of Future Past. In the Days of Future Past reality, Sentinels rule over North America. Here, many mutants are eliminated with only a few managing to survive, but still with many of them being kept in camps where they are worked until they die and are branded with an M tattoo on their face, so they will forever be recognized as a lowly mutant, unable to escape prosecution. Even many superheroes have been killed in this reality of Earth 811 because they attempted to protect mutants and put a stop on the Sentinels' reign, which also made them targets. One of the main reasons why the Sentinels are successful in taking over in this story is because of the deaths of Senator Robert Kelly, Professor Charles Xavier, and Moira McTaggart, who were all killed by the Brotherhood of Evil Mutants. Number 4. Death of the Justice League. The Death of the Justice League has kicked off as of issue 75 of the current Justice League series, which started back in 2018, and wow, it is rough. What happens to the Justice League? Well, they face off against Pariah, who himself is from one of the first worlds to be targeted during the events of Crisis on Infinite Earths. He was cursed with basically watching all these worlds die again and again, unable to stop it, despite being one of the first people to warn everyone that Crisis on Infinite Earths was coming. Now, with the multiverse reset following the events of Death Metal, Pariah claims that he sees the signs of the crisis happening again. Desperate to prevent this, his plan is to wipe the slate clean when it comes to the heroes, so that the possible new anti-monitor who will come into existence will have no reason to continue with the crisis. Seems like some flawed logic to me, but this man has also seen some so I understand his desperation to do whatever he thinks will work when it comes to avoiding another crisis. Number 3. Age of Apocalypse. While the Age of Apocalypse does eventually end, this reality is based on the whole idea of what the world would be like if the big bad villain won, and by big bad villain, we of course mean Apocalypse this time around. Which is precisely what happens here. These events are actually all set into motion by Legion, who accidentally causes the death of his father, Professor X. Legion traveled back in time with a plan to kill Magneto, but Professor X shields Magneto against Legion's attack, dying instead in his place. Apocalypse ends up attempting to take over the world earlier on in his timeline in this universe, the AOA reality of Earth 295. Magneto is the only one who attempts to oppose Apocalypse, and as such, En-Sabah-Nur is mainly successful in his attempt for world domination. Apocalypse would oppress humanity, seeing superpowered beings as superior, and it would be many years before his reign of terror was ended. Number 2. Final Crisis. Which actually apparently wasn't so final, as we have another crisis headed our way now, known as Dark Crisis. But regardless of whether or not it was actually final, Final Crisis was definitely a bad time for Earth. In this story, Darkseid actually succeeds in obtaining and releasing the anti-life equation on Earth. He puts it on the internet where it can be easily seen and then spread. Those who see it basically lose their will to live, becoming enslaved to Darkseid and his will, instead of having their own. Well, in the end, the heroes do manage to break free from the influence of Darkseid and the anti-life equation, defeating Darkseid in the end with a radion bullet. Darkseid still manages to enslave all of Earth and many of its heroes, for a time being seen as the victor. Number 1. Life 9 of Moira X. Well, this life in the end seemingly gave mutants the information needed to beat the rise of the Sentinels and of AI, it also was a world where they had lost much. If anything, it actually set the stage for the reset of Moira's 10th life, where mutants supposedly won. However, even that victory would be revealed to be more complicated, as Moira's true motives were revealed during the events of the 2021 Inferno series, and it turns out her motives were actually to kinda end mutant kind in a nicer way. Still, just taking this world and this continuity as it is, the mutants here have almost all been exterminated. In this life, Moira joined forces with Apocalypse in an attempt to make a final stand against the all-powerful Nimrod. They would not be successful in killing Nimrod, who had killed so many mutants and had also worked to oppress the humans as well. They would only manage to retrieve the information on how and when the Nimrod came to be, allowing them to succeed, hopefully, in Moira's 10th life, where she and mutant kind had failed in her 9th. However, we also know that that didn't really work out because Nimrod does exist in her 10th life, so basically are the mutants kinda screwed? I think maybe they are. Number 10. Iris West is killed by Professor Zoom. That's right, Professor Zoom actually succeeded at one point in killing the love of Barry Allen's life, Iris West. Eobard Thawne, how dare you? And it would only be fixed by a continuity reset basically. Well, and prior to that, Barry Allen basically dipping from his own reality to go live in the future of the 30th century with an alternate future version of Iris, who was kinda made to just exist for him, having been reborn there, so it's kinda like his Iris but also not, if that makes sense. And if it doesn't, I mean, fair enough, it's pretty confusing. Iris died after Barry and Iris were married, and after she knew about his secret identity. Professor Zoom, as he was known then, ended up simply finding Iris at a party and phasing his hand through her head to kill her instantly. This loss hurt Barry so much that later on, when he found love with Fiona Webb, who he was engaged to marry, when Professor Zoom attacked them on their wedding day, Barry could not take it and responded by killing the villain. It was after this and a following trial for Barry Allen, where he was actually charged with manslaughter because, you know, he killed Thawne, that Barry left the main reality to go be happy with the Iris of the 30th century. Although that would all get wiped away following the events of Crisis on Infinite Earths, but anyways, ain't that just how it goes when crises come a-knockin'. Number 9. Sisterhood of Mutants. In case you were wondering what was going on in the thumbnail from our previous top 10 times superheroes lost list, I'm here to answer that for you now. What's going on there is Lady Mastermind is in essence keeping Emma Frost trapped in kind of like an illusion, so Emma's like trapped in her own mind. Don't worry though, the White Queen's defeat would only be temporary. This was during the creation of the villainous mutant team known as the Sisterhood of Mutants. Yeah, you might know about the Brotherhood of Evil Mutants, but did you know there is a Sisterhood too? It was led by none none other than the Goblin Queen herself, Madeline Pryor, who had a plan for how to deal with everyone as she invaded the X-Men's headquarters. Her plan for Emma was for Lady Mastermind to keep Frost trapped within her own mind by using illusions. This, by the way, is also at a time where Emma Frost is actually one of the good guys, not the bad guys, just to be clear. However, Emma would ultimately fight back against Lady Mastermind and find a way out of this when she surprised Mastermind with her new secondary mutation, her diamond form, which makes her immune to any kind of psionic attack. Emma also kicked butt in her diamond form, landing blows that knocked Lady Mastermind into next week. Yeah, I would not want to be hit by a diamond form Emma Frost. That would hurt a lot. Diamonds are really painful, I'm sure, to be punched with. I mean, I assume a lot of things are, but diamonds especially. And friends, before we move on to this next spot, if you are loving this list and you want another list where we talk about the times the superheroes lost, honestly, I didn't think I was going to be able to come up with many of them, but the more I do these lists, the more things come into my mind about all of the times superheroes have lost. So let me know in the comments, and maybe we'll do a part 3. Number 8, Dark Avengers. Sometimes heroes lose, not when villains win against them, but just when villains win in general. That was in essence the case with what happened when it came to the creation of the Dark Avengers. The Dark Avengers were the team of Norman Osborn, who probably just called them, you know, Avengers. No dark implications from his side. That would be pretty suspicious if it's like, hey guys, look at my team, these are the Dark Avengers. Don't worry, they're totally great people and none of them are villains. Don't worry about it. Seems a little suspect. Their editorial name though was definitely the Dark Avengers from a reader's standpoint, so that's how we know them. This team of villains marketed as heroes came to be after Osborn was given the reins to create his own organization after the fall of S.H.I.E.L.D. Why Norman Osborn, formerly known as Major Villain Green Goblin? Because at the time, he was being celebrated as a hero after defeating Queen Veranke, leader of the Skrull Secret Invasion on live television broadcast. Norman created his own organization known as Hammer, which was an acronym that he just liked. It actually doesn't even stand for anything. He was just like, I like the name Hammer. Make that make sense, let's not worry about it. He also created his own evil Avengers team known as the Dark Avengers during a period referred to as Dark Reign. So if you want to go check it out, you can look up Dark Avengers, you can look up Dark Reign, you can read some cool stuff. Number 7, Death of Green Arrow. Ollie has died a few times, but one of the most iconic deaths of Green Arrow, I would say, comes from the late 80s to 90s series of Green Arrow. Here in issues number 100 to 101, while Oliver Queen was working to infiltrate a team of eco-terrorists, he finds himself tangled up in one of their plots and is one of the few people who can basically stop a bomb from going off and destroying Metropolis. Well, he can stop it going off in Metropolis, I should say. He can't necessarily stop it from going off, unfortunately. He ends up getting his arm stuck in the detonation chamber and is unable to remove it without the bomb going off. Superman shows up and somehow this ends up being a problem even Superman can't solve. Superman! In the end, Green Arrow chooses to sacrifice himself to protect the people of Metropolis rather than still save the people of Metropolis, but instead just lose his arm instead of, you know, losing his whole life. I mean, okay. I personally just think DC really wanted to kill Oliver Queen for some reason at this point, because I think Superman had some plans prior to Ollie making the bomb go boom that could have, you know, maybe worked. Bomb 1, Queen 0, I guess. Number 6, Death of Thor. You could say the death of Thor is basically inevitable. When it comes to the world of the Norse gods of Asgard, many of their demises are ruled by prophetic fate. Thor is no exception. We learn this in his fight against his uncle, Kull Borson, the Serpent, in Fear Itself. During the Fear Itself event, Kull Borson escapes from his prison and rises again. The condemned and long imprisoned brother of Odin once more rises to power by feeding on the fear of the people of Earth, naming his own champions who are each gifted a hammer. Thor in turn is destined to battle his uncle and in so doing unfortunately die. Despite Odin's protests at his son attempting to save Midgard, Thor does do battle with the Serpent, saving Midgard, aka Earth, but at the cost of his own life. That is, of course, until he's next resurrected, as so often happens with our favorite heroes in comics. Sometimes you just gotta defeat a demogorge and then you're back to life. You know how it goes. Man, comics. Number 5. DC vs. Vampires. DC vs. Vampires is another monster mashup of an alternate reality where the heroes of that world are overrun by monsters. In this case, the monsters being, you guessed it, vampires. The loses start, of course, with the very first issue, as the premise for this tale is set up. Okay, premise. Mary Queen of Blood has been killed, and despite being a villain, she was the only one holding back vampires from all-out war. Andrew Bennett, aka I Vampire, attempts to hunt her killers down in order to find out what is going on and why, and discovers a plot of vampire kind to take over Earth, not just starting a war, but almost completely eradicating the human race, at least eradicating their powers. The plan involves taking over the planet, subjugating the human population, and keeping them around only to treat them basically like cattle. Andrew ends up getting proof, a vial of one survivor's blood, Lex Luthor, which also seems to be weaponized against vampires. He also then decides to head out to the Justice League to warn them, but in the end he is defeated by an already turned Hal Jordan. Hal's evil again, oh gosh, who would have guessed? And that's just the beginning of the story, so it gets a lot more vampires taking over the world, if you like that jam. I personally like that jam. I'm like, yeah, put me in that jam. I like when vampires take over the world. Let's go. Number 4, Purple Man for President. Purple Man's presidency takes place in an alternate reality of Earth 460, and it's actually his rise to power that also creates another alternate universe, a very famous one in fact, you could say. The reality of Earth 311, aka the 1602 reality. This is because Purple Man initially is imprisoning and killing all heroes alive who still oppose him. But with Captain America, Kilgrave sees a greater threat there. If he kills Cap, Cap will basically become a martyr to the people. So instead, Purple Man simply removes Cap completely from the playing board, but not in such a way that the populace can't rally around, Cap's defeat or death. Kilgrave sends Rogers back to the year 1599, and thereby accidentally creates a superhero reality set in the past, that of 1602. Number 3, Death Metal. During Death Metal, our heroes lost hardcore. That is before they won, but still, they lost at one point. They are lucky they were permitted to stick around, as that is the only way they were able to come back from such a dark place. Pun intended. Because it's Dark Knights, Death Metal. Get it? I'll just see myself out. During Death Metal, the trinity of Superman, Wonder Woman, and of course Batman ended up going against a Batman Who Laughs and his cohort Persephone. In the end, the first time around anyways, they lost and the world became reshaped temporarily in a darker image. The trinity were split up, with Wonder Woman reluctantly agreeing to join Batman Who Laughs. She didn't really have much of a choice. That's how she actually got her Chainsaw of Truth though, which I love that Chainsaw of Truth, it's so cool. And that's also how in the end the trinity was able to survive until a point that they could each get free and then basically rejoin back up with one another. Ultimately, Wonder Woman would sacrifice herself to save the multiverse, banishing the dark multiverse and restarting everything, setting it right again after getting a glimpse into the potential future, which we would know as Future State. But before that happened, it seemed as though the core JLA members would be trapped and defeated forever. It was a pretty hopeless time for a little bit there. Number 2, Time Runs Out. In some cases, antagonists aren't so much people aiming to defeat heroes, but are instead simply seeming natural occurring disasters which cannot be stopped. Sometimes that's the villain of the story. No matter how hard our heroes try, they just can't beat it. That is essentially how Time Runs Out ends, with Iron Man and Captain America being crushed by the unavoidable doom that is the Incursions. Literally crushed. The final incursion smooshed Earth 616 and Earth 1610 together, seemingly ending both universes. However, in the end, Dr. Doom would step up to the plate, accepting the power of Molecule Man and defying the Beyonders by saving the multiverse and creating his own battle world. But before all of that went down, everyone was trying to figure out how to stop these incursions, and ultimately were pretty much failing at doing so. In the end, it came down to infighting between Tony and Steve as everyone else prepared their lifeboats, hoping to preserve at least a few of the best of them. As Steve blamed Tony and the two fought on, the incursions arrived, squishing them and seemingly, at least momentarily, ending everything, but not so much in the end. Number 1, Deceased. If you thought Marvel Zombies was bleak, wait till you head to the DC version of that reality, Deceased. Here, instead of everyone being infected by a traditional zombie virus, it's more comic codified than that. In Deceased, the heroes and villains of the world instead become overtaken by the anti-life equation, which in this case turns them into hyper-violent, seemingly mindless beings driven only by rage. Basically, different versions of zombies. Poor Cyborg even ends up kind of as patient zero in this, spreading said virus to the rest of the population and infecting many beloved heroes the world over.
Coming in at number 10, we have Quicksilver, the speedster that both Fox and Disney were throwing into the movies, which had a lot of comic fans confused. Like, how many nerds out there had to explain to their friends why the same character was in 2 movies but played by different people, but they weren't in the same universe? Thankfully, the MCU is now all connected and we don't need to have that conversation again, as long as Sony doesn't try to rip Spider-Man away from us. I couldn't handle that another time. For fans of the X-Men comics, you will be well aware of the House of M storyline. This was one of the most monumental events that has ever happened in the Marvel Universe, and it changed the mutant race forever. Scarlet Witch was going through an immense amount of emotional stress, and she was at her breaking point and decided that she would use her reality-altering powers to reshape the world forever. She called out, "No more humans," and the population of superpowered beings that was in the range of 1.2 million was now pulled down to less than 200. Over 1 million mutants were stripped of their powers, and Quicksilver was along with them. I wonder how it felt experiencing the crushing boredom of traffic for the first time ever in your life. Coming in at number 9, we have the Green Lantern. Hal Jordan has often been used as a representation of the man when it comes to any sort of social issue brought up in the DC universe when he's involved. After all, he is a cop, so it kind of fits the bill for his character. Well, in the 70s, there was a lot going on in the world when it came to American politics, and DC wanted to take this on with Green Lantern and the Green Arrow. They were going down to try and calm the American people. Do you think these two guys became friends just because they both wear green? It was like the easiest form of association. Well, the two of them went down to confront some American miners who were protesting for better wages. And because Hal had been spending so much time on Earth, his ring was feeling a little bit weak. He tried to confront the miners to get them to stop, and in this moment, his ring lost all of its power. Also, the miners were fully locked and loaded with guns, so it was a little bit of a sticky situation. Coming in at number 8, we have Miss Marvel, one of the most super powerful characters in the Marvel Universe. Following a similar space cop motif that Green Lantern uses, it would seem that very few people would be able to stand up to her. I mean, we all remember in Avengers Endgame when she took a headbutt from Thanos without even flinching, but that doesn't mean that she's impervious to any sort of harm, especially when we're talking about harm coming from Rogue. Miss Marvel and Rogue got into a one-on-one conflict that would change the two characters forever. In this clash, Rogue comes in contact with Miss Marvel and uses her vampiric power draining abilities, but she wasn't nice about it. Rogue drained Miss Marvel until she sucked out every last ounce of super powered energy that was inside of her, making Rogue insanely strong and leaving Miss Marvel not that marvelous. Next on the list, we got Superman. Some people would love to see Superman become less powerful just because it might make the character a little bit more interesting, but that's tough to do because so much of the DC universe has been built around his godlike presence. One way that this has been done tastefully was when the New 52 run of Superman introduced a new power. Superman could now perform what would be called a super flare. As many of you know, Superman gets his power from the sun. This solar energy builds up in his body like a smartphone battery charging. On a few occasions, when he comes out of contact with the sun for too long, he will lose his powers and all of his abilities. But with this super flare, he can unleash all that energy stored in his body in one blast like a massive nuke. However, when he does this, he will be without his powers for 24 hours as his body sucks in that good sunlight. Next on the list, we have Storm, one of the coolest comic book characters ever created. I've always been a fan of any hero who has storm powers because there is so much you can do with them. Got a fire? Bring in some rain. Got a big monster? Hit it with some lightning. Got a town that needs clean energy? Build a windmill and then create some wind. But in Uncanny X-Men issue 185, Storm would no longer be the queen of weather. This was because the Future Mutant Forge worked with Henry Peter Gyrich to come up with a weapon that could be used to neutralize a mutant's powers. See, Gyrich was a little bit peeved because Rogue had recently gotten into a major conflict with S.H.I.E.L.D. This led to Gyrich attempting to depower Rogue with this newly crafted weapon, but a misfire led to it hitting Storm. Right next on the list, we have Bruce Banner. Jason Aaron did one of my favorite runs of the Hulk. There was a short series where this time Hulk gets rid of Banner, not the other way around. The Hulk goes to see Dr. Doom, and Doom genetically grows a Banner clone and then surgically removes the section of Hulk's brain which contains Banner and implants it into this new clone. So now the two can coexist without each other. Hulk actually deals with this very well. He checks out the world and ignores everything that the previous superpowered world would bring to him, but it refuses to leave him alone. Banner eventually goes mad and starts making an island of superpowered Hulk beasts with an attempt to recreate the Hulk in his own body. A team of mad scientist hunters commission the Hulk to work with them to take out the newly insane Banner, and the two sides of the same coin go head on, and that's only in the first few issues. It gets way crazier down the road. Right after Hulk, we have Thor. The Asgardian has always had a lot of family problems. If he's not fighting with his brother, it's with his dad or his sister. On one occasion, Odin thought it was time to teach Thor a tough lesson. Because Thor is insanely powerful, he's always walked around as a brutish thug who wants to punch first and ask questions later. Odin thought it was time that he learned some empathy for those who aren't able to wield a hammer that was made out of a fallen star. So he stripped him of his power and then sent him to Earth. Now Thor might have walked around like an angry kid who wants to have cookies for breakfast, but Odin solved this problem by also wiping his memory. This way Thor would be forced to be a real person and see what it's like to feel and act like a normal person. Of course, he eventually got his memory back and returned to the mantle of God of Thunder. Right after that, we have Doctor Strange. Doctor Strange lost his powers in one of the coolest, dumbest ways possible. Earth was under attack from the Impericul, which are a futuristic robot race from another dimension. They hate magic and travel through time and space to destroy it in every form. The Impericul came to Earth to battle Doctor Strange, and Strange summoned up all the magic on Earth into his body in an attempt to destroy the Impericul leader, but this failed and left Strange in a weakened state with no magic left on the planet for him to use his powers. Coming in at number 2, we have Wonder Woman. Strength is a cornerstone of this character, and with the loss of her powers, it was shown that she can represent that in more ways than one. In the 70s, Wonder Woman willingly gave up her powers because she sought to follow her heart. If she was to stay the superpowered goddess, it would mean she would have to return to Themyscira and leave behind the heartthrob Steve Trevor. In her newly depowered state, she didn't give up her life of hero work. She went on to study a new martial art, probably making her even more powerful in the long run. I mean, if you can kick someone's butt while you're just regular flesh and blood, then when you pack some superpowered juice into that, you can start knocking people out like 19-year-old Mike Tyson. Part of the change to this character was to coincide with the women's movement that was happening in the 70s. DC Comics wanted to represent a strong female character that could be closer associated to the female readers that were picking up the comic. And for the number 1 spot, we have Wolverine. It would be pretty hard to be Wolverine without the powers. I mean, even take Superman. On a few occasions, he has been stripped of his powers, and he's still that Boy Scout at heart and will do what's right no matter what. But with Wolverine, a big part of his personality is being able to be punched in the face and come back like nothing happened, which probably made the loss of his powers even more interesting. Back in 2013, Wolverine was infected with a very advanced virus that attacked his healing factor. It basically made him so he was just a regular guy. Well, a regular guy that could probably still crank out 100 pull-ups. But this was so severe that he couldn't even use his claws anymore, so he had wrist-mounted claws. I guess you can take the powers out of the Wolverine, but you can't stop him from trying to slice people in half. Now, this level of aggression without the healing factor backing him up eventually led to his death.
Number 10, oil needed. Iron Man. Back in Iron Man's early days, his suits weren't up to par with what we're familiar with today. In Avengers issue 2, right after the team's inaugural issue, the group fights Space Phantom, who intends on invading Earth with an alien force. Phantom comes to the planet first and ends up impersonating members of the Avengers team, which causes a lot of confusion and fighting within the team. The group has caught on to Space Phantom's shtick, and Thor incapacitates him by using his weather manipulation abilities to create a rainstorm that causes Iron Man's suit to rust over. Now, to be fair, it was Space Phantom impersonating Tony Stark here, and technically he was the one to suffer the loss. But considering that he was mimicking the hero, that's a pretty bad design flaw to bring to light. Needless to say, we're glad that Tony caught on to that before any real damage occurred to the beloved hero. Up next, number 9, Batwoman as a plot device. Always a shame when a superhero, especially a female superhero, is used merely as a plot device to further the story of another character, usually a male. It's really the basis of the women in refrigerators argument. Don't know it? Google it.
you should. Anyway, this was the case with the initial Batwoman Kathy Kane. While the modern day Batwoman Kate Kane has gone above and beyond her former iteration, back in the day when she was created in 1956 as a means to give Batman a Batman family in the aftermath of the Comics Code Authority, and claims that Batman and Robin were gay, she was literally a fluff heroine whose utility belt included devices disguised as lipstick and compact mirrors. Yeah. When Detective Comics issue 485 came around in 1979, Kathy Kane was killed off unceremoniously, with the League of Assassins brutally murdering her. The whole story was a plot device for Batman to have a reason to go after the League of Assassins. Yikes. Moving on to number 8, Hank Pym and Pymtron. Oh, this one is sad. Hank Pym has one of the most ridiculous histories as far as Marvel characters are concerned. He has been through a lot, but most recently we witnessed a whole new humiliating saga for Henry Pym in which he physically merged with Ultron, the robot he created in the comics that became one of the most memorable Avengers foes. During the Infinity Countdown story arc, Ultron managed to steal the Soul Gem, and a fragment of Hank's soul ended up trapped within the Stone Soul world. Now at the time the two had merged, but really it was just kind of Ultron wearing Hank's skin. While Hank was in there, he experienced an idyllic fantasy in which the Avengers had saved him and he was home reunited with his friends. In reality, a demon, the all-consuming Devondra, was busy consuming his soul. We haven't heard from him since. And it's been a little while and he might be gone forever, but probably not, cause comics. But even then he'll probably be brought back and something horrible will happen to him. It's the Hank Pym way. Up next, number 7, Batman punched by Hal Jordan. Batman has long disliked members of the Green Lantern Corps. It took him a very long time to be willing to trust Hal Jordan after he had become Parallax in the Emerald Twilight storyline. While Hal was possessed by the villain, he ended up going on a rampage and killing several Lanterns and Guardians, and we all know how Bruce has major trust issues. In Green Lantern Rebirth issue 6, Hal has had enough with Batman's resentment and open hostility. Hal felt he had paid his dues. He sacrificed himself to reignite the sun after he was resurrected, and he's been working real hard to prove to everyone that he is one of the good guys. Batman doesn't entirely buy it, so what does Hal do? Well, he punches him in front of a bunch of other Green Lanterns. But to be fair, Batman kinda had it coming. He's long been an to not just Hal Jordan, but to other Green Lanterns in the past. Which actually brings us to our next number. In at 6, Batman punches a different Green Lantern. Long before Hal Jordan smashed his fist into the world's greatest detective's chin, Batman was on the giving end of a similar interaction. This time it was between the Caped Crusader and another Green Lantern, Guy Gardner, who is arguably the least like Green Lantern out there. 'Cause he's a bit of a dick. Anyway, this went down in the Justice League issue 5 with Batman being fed up of Guy's insufferable attitude. Batman was the one in charge of the Justice League International team and Guy was just whining all the time. Guy makes it clear that he thinks Batman shouldn't be the leader of the team, and he's constantly sulking and complaining about how he should be the one in charge instead. So what does Bats do in order to establish his dominance? Well, he knocks Guy out with one punch in front of the rest of the team. Regardless of socking Guy in the face, Batman is still all business, getting a team meeting underway as Guy lies unconscious on the floor. The best part is the reactions from the rest of the team. And at number 5, Doctor Strange strangled by his cape. For this number, we're diving into an alternate universe in the Marvel Multiverse, the Ultimate Universe, Earth 1610. This universe is categorized by significantly grittier versions of our beloved 616 heroes, and during the penultimate event in that universe, Ultimatum, many a hero and villain experience particularly brutal demises, including Dr. Stephen Strange. While fighting against Dormammu, Strange is killed in one of the most absurd ways, by his own cloak. It's a move that's never been pulled by the ruler of the Dark Dimension in the regular 616, but in the Ultimate Universe it's something that surprisingly worked. Strange is strangled by his cloak, turning his face purple until his head explodes due to all of his blood being squeezed up into his head. Needless to say, it was pretty darn gruesome. Up next, number 4, Beast Boy and the drugged envelope. Oh. The Judas Contract is by far one of the most memorable Teen Titans stories in the group's history. During this story arc, a metahuman the name of Terra joins up with the Titans. Her and Beast Boy, aka Changeling, which is what he was going by at the time, developed a bit of a romantic relationship. It's then revealed that Terra has been playing the Titans all along, and is in cahoots with one of their biggest foes, Deathstroke. During the story's climax, the sinister duo uses various methods to subdue the Titans, one of which is really embarrassing for Beast Boy. They take advantage of his vanity, sending him dozens of letters with requests for autographs from fangirls. Gar is like super into this, and he gets straight to work signing pictures and licking envelopes. But turns out the glue on the envelopes has been drugged. As he realizes what's happened, he is knocked out cold. Up next, number 3, Wasp, and that time that she fell out of a tree. Yes, this is actually a thing that happened. And yes, you probably guessed it, it happened during the Silver Age, when comics were at their wackiest. This case in particular featured Avengers member Wasp, who had escaped conflict in an exhausted state, seeking out the rest of the team in aid, because apparently back in the early days of the Avengers she wasn't overly useful. In the process, when shrunken down, she's almost eaten by a hungry little bird. But after growing in size, the tree branch that she was perched on snaps, and she falls to the ground, unable to shrink down in time to save herself. So she lands on the ground and is knocked unconscious. Perhaps my favorite part of these panels is the very end, where the final panel reads, "But now we must leave the fallen Avenger as she lies silent and still in the lonely glen, for there are other urgent matters which concern us." God, jeez. Clearly even the writers didn't care about Wasp back then. Kinda harsh, guys. Up next, number 2, Wonder Woman and Men. In Wonder Woman's earlier days, she had to endure a handful of stories in which her feminist prowess was shut down by silly plot devices. Like this one. According to the Amazonian law in the Golden Age, if a man ever binded Wonder Woman's bracelets together, she would lose her powers. Seems kind of counterintuitive to her character, doesn't it? Part of this was because of her creator William M. Marston's BDSM background and influence on Wonder Woman's characters. Case in point, when this occurred, Wonder Woman has a thought bubble that reads, "When an Amazon girl permits a man to chain her bracelets of submission together, she becomes weak as other women in a man-ruled world." For f***ing sake. I mean, yes, it was the 40s after all. We're just glad this silly stipulation has been retconned out of existence. Last but not least, in our number 1 spot, Deathstroke kicks the JLA's butts. This is arguably the Justice League of America's most embarrassing failure. Potentially. In the Identity Crisis storyline, Elongated Man's wife, Sue Dibney, is murdered, with Dr. Light presumed to be the murderer. Over the course of the story, it becomes apparent that members of the Justice League have been in on a whole controversial mind-wipe scheme that individuals like Batman were not privy to. It's a whole lot of moral grayness, and the way Sue's rape at the hands of Dr. Light was approached is something that the story gets a lot of heat for. Spoiler alert, the JLA's response was to mind-wipe everyone who was involved. Batman was also mind-wiped in order to prevent him from making everyone take the moral high ground. Anyway, that's all context. Dr. Light, who had been mind-wiped into a literal buffoon, hired Deathstroke Slade Wilson to help protect himself from the JLA. Deathstroke takes on Green Arrow, The Flash, Zatanna, Elongated Man, Hawkman, the Atom, and Black Canary. And guess what? Deathstroke won.
Number 10, the Plutonian. If you're familiar with the Irredeemable series, then you will likely already know why I put it so low on the list today. But if you're not, that's no worries. This entire storyline is about the Plutonian, the supposed strongest hero ever to exist, and is all about a superhero snapping and losing control. Very little is known about the Plutonian, even by the people who are supposed to be very close with him, but he draws a lot of parallels with Superman, as he has a Fortress of Solitude-like hideout in a volcano, and not to mention his powers are basically the same with a few more sprinkled in there for fun. Mark Waid, the writer, argues that not all superheroes are mentally equipped to deal with the power and responsibility of being a superhero, so it's bound to happen that one would lose it and just go completely mental. This story follows the Plutonian as he slaughters the people of Earth and all of his former friends, family, and allies. The comic evolves into making the Plutonian a supervillain, or at least shows him in the early stages of it. He's a hero on the edge of losing complete control, and it does a great job of showing how others are meant to deal with the mess that he creates. I highly recommend you check out Boom Studios' Irredeemable series. It has a total of 37 issues, and it really is a great read. Number 9, Green Lantern. The specific Green Lantern that I'll be talking about is Hal Jordan after his home was destroyed in 1992 to 1993's Death of Superman's storyline. At one point during the story, Coast City was destroyed by Mongol, and Hal was not very happy about that, to say the least. To try and resurrect the city back to its former glory, Hal attempts to use the power of his Green Lantern ring, but its power is revoked before he can make it permanent. Consumed by grief and anger, he ends up becoming the villain Parallax and goes on a mass killing spree, killing almost all of the other Green Lanterns so he could take their rings and absorb their power. It ended up getting to the point where Hal was so powerful that he was one of the most feared superheroes in the galaxy, and to date this is considered to be one of the most strongest iterations of the character. And even though it's not really his fault since he was under the control of Parallax, you'd still think that his strong will would at least have tried to resist the temptation, but alas, that wasn't the case. Why not give this story a read for yourself so you can see just how strong Hal became by starting with 1992's Superman, The Man of Steel, Volume 1, number 18. Number 8. Ant-Man. The specific series that I'll be talking about for Ant-Man is the Ultimatum series that ran in 2016, and yes, I know that it's not considered canon by many people, but we're not talking canon, we're talking about losing control, and that's exactly what happened to Ant-Man in this twisted storyline. Within the first 5 pages of the first issue, everything goes terribly wrong, as out of nowhere the sky darkens and all of Manhattan is flooded, and many of our heroes are submerged underwater. Some are lucky enough to resurface, but unfortunately Janet Van Dyne, aka the Wasp, drowned and Hank was unable to find her no matter how hard he tried. Following the tidal wave and in the second issue after the water had cleared, we see the entire city of Manhattan in shambles and overrun with criminals doing their thing, and this is exactly when we see Ant-Man and Hawkeye come across the villain the Blob as he's feasting on Janet's body. This obviously did not sit well with Hank, so standing at about 60 stories tall as Giant Man, he just picks up the Blob, states that he is not going to play around with him, and then straight up just bites his head off and spits it out on the ground. The loss of a loved one can really push people to do some crazy things, and apparently it can push a hero to the point of murder. Check out this storyline for yourself, or feel free to skip ahead to issue 3, where this gruesome scene takes place. Number 7. Daredevil. In 2003's Daredevil Volume 2 number 49, we get to see a side of Daredevil that we rarely get to see. Obviously Matt Murdock has gone off the rails a few times and flipped out thanks to his bad temper, but man, this was different. In this issue we see Bullseye show up at Matt's place after he's already killed Karen Page and Elektra, just to kill another one of his girlfriends, and upon his arrival Matt immediately throws him out a window and begins the beatdown of a lifetime. He took so much joy from beating the villain and mocking the Bullseye tattoo on his forehead, and just to really bring home the rage and get his point across, Daredevil grabbed a rock from the ground and carved the bullseye into the villain's forehead, making it even more permanent than it already was by forever scarring it. It's not even the action that's so insane, because like I said, with Ant-Man, the loss of a loved one can really lead you to do some pretty crazy things, but it's his reaction afterward, just smiling ear to ear, biggest grin you've ever seen in your life. Give this issue a read for yourself to see how truly merciless DD can really be, because man, saying I was surprised is truly an understatement. Number 6. Cyclops. Scott Summers has always had trouble controlling his powers, that's no secret, but during the events of 2012's Avengers vs. X-Men, it only got worse. In this 12-issue storyline, we see the Phoenix Force get fragmented and inhabit 5 prominent characters in the X-Men universe: Cyclops, Emma Frost, Colossus, Magic, and Namor, and the whole storyline basically watches the Avengers and the X-Men do their best to take down the Phoenix Force. In issue 11, we saw a crazed Phoenix Force-powered Cyclops lose himself to his newfound thirst for power. The issue ended with a big showdown between Cyclops and his mentor, Professor Xavier. Xavier tried to convince his surrogate son to relinquish the powers and come back to the good side, but Cyclops resisted and instead embraced the full power of the Phoenix and killed Charles Xavier. This was such a shocking moment because Scott is normally so level-headed and controlled, and to see him so power-hungry and full of rage is a side of him I never thought we would see. It can be argued that it wasn't his fault since he wasn't the mastermind behind everything, but he is still the one who lost control and snapped, so he has to deal with what he did. Number 5. Green Arrow. Another character who is usually pretty good at keeping his cool, however, in 2010's Justice League Cry for Justice storyline, his patience and control are pushed to their absolute limits, and needless to say, he did not deal with the pressure too well. This is all thanks to Prometheus, a villain determined to attack superheroes and hit them where it hurts the most. In this story, the Red Arrow had his arm completely ripped off, and then his daughter was crushed as part of Prometheus' plan. This really pissed off the Green Arrow, but he decided to let Prometheus go after he'd been captured, and it seemed like, for a time, that the Green Arrow had kept his emotions in check. But then the scene shifted to Prometheus' lair, and we saw that was not the case, even in the slightest. Prometheus heard a noise behind him, and when he turned to investigate, he saw that Green Arrow had come to pay him a little visit. After a very brief discussion, the Green Arrow shoots an arrow straight into Prometheus' forehead, sticking him to the wall and killing him, stating that Prometheus never knew that at his core, Green Arrow wasn't a hero. He was a hunter. Check this storyline out for yourself and let me know what you think about it in the comments below. I personally love Green Arrow, and I think this ruthless side of him is pretty freaking sweet. Number 4. Spider-Man. Back in Black, a great AC/DC song, but also a Spider-Man storyline that ran in 2007. After a sniper's bullet changes everything for Peter Parker and his life, he dons his infamous black costume once more. From then on, Spider-Man would stop at nothing to find the man who pulled the trigger and, even more important, the man who gave the order to kill. This is truly Spider-Man at his darkest hour. Now I realize that was probably a little bit vague, so I'll just tell you straight up. Aunt May is the one who was shot, and this caused Peter to go off the rails. He tracked down everyone involved with the shooting and found that it all led to the Kingpin. He found the Kingpin in prison and he beat the living daylights out of him. He beat him within an inch of his life and then promised to kill him if Aunt May was to actually die. After he beat him to a pulp and got Fisk really scared, Peter decided to let him live with the shame of being handily beaten by a guy half his size in front of literally everyone in prison. Certainly surprising that the joke-filled webhead could be so ruthless, but I don't know, can you really blame him? Give the storyline a read for yourself by checking out 2007's Amazing Spider-Man number 539 to 543. Number 3, the Hulk. You always have to include the Hulk on any list that involved the hero losing control because, like, you know, it's the Hulk, it's kind of his thing. In World War Hulk, the sequel to Planet Hulk, the Hulk is married to Kara and they have a child on the way. After he is tricked by the Illuminati and sent into space with her, their spaceship exploded and she and the unborn child were unfortunately killed. Now, we all know that the Hulk has a very bad temper during the best of times, so you can only imagine what this tragedy did to him. I feel like I don't need to say it, but I will anyways. He went absolutely insane. He traveled from place to place, smashing everyone and everything in his path, and he single-handedly destroyed so many different superheroes that I won't even start to list them because I would be here for hours. Eventually his rage grows to such an extreme that the radiation threatens the entire Earth and he is taken down to save the planet. Even if you consider how grouchy the Hulk is and how often he loses it, this is entirely a different level for him. Give the story a read for yourself, starting with 2007's World War Hulk Prologue World Breaker Volume 1. Number 2, Wolverine. You probably know what I'm going to be talking about if you're a fan of the X-Men series when it comes to Wolverine. In the Wolverine Old Man Logan storyline, we get to see the vicious side of Wolverine that we have all come to know and love. However, this time it wasn't necessarily his fault. So basically it's the future and Logan is now an old man and he hasn't used the Wolverine persona or his claws since this mysterious night in the past when a bunch of villains supposedly attacked. We learn through some flashbacks that a massive group of 40 supervillains attacked the X-Men mansion, and during this attack, Wolverine gets in touch with his primal side and goes absolutely crazy and kills every single one of them. After the fight and the intense slaughter, things change and Wolverine realizes it was all just an illusion. The entire time Wolverine had his vision and mind altered by Mysterio, and all the villains that he killed in combat were actually his fellow X-Men. This destroyed Logan and he decided to retire his Wolverine mantle after that, essentially killing that part of him so he would never do something like that again. It's definitely a very sad way to end a run as a hero, but I see why he felt that was necessary. Give this a read for yourself, starting with 2018's Old Man Logan Volume 1, Number 1, and while you're at it, why not rewatch the movie Logan and see if you can, I don't know, draw any comparison. Number 1, Tara. If you're like me, then your first introduction to Tara was probably through the Teen Titans TV show, and man, I always remember thinking how cool of a character she was, and in the specific issue that I'm going to be talking about today, we get to see exactly how crazy strong she can be. The Dark Multiverse Teen Titans The Judas Contract reimagines one of the most renowned stories in comic book history, The Judas Contract. In this reimagining, Tara's betrayal starts with not the Teen Titans, but with Deathstroke himself. Now free from her mentor's influence and supercharged by the same serum that turned Slade Wilson into the world's deadliest man, Tara works to forge a new destiny written in the Teen Titans' blood. Now calling herself Gaia and viewing herself as a literal goddess, she changed her costume and attacked the Teen Titans Tower, killing Raven, Starfire, Wonder Girl, and Cyborg before battling against Robin and Kid Flash, who she was also able to overpower and kill. I could continue the list of who she killed, but again, we would be here forever, so I'll save you the trouble. She managed to destabilize the Earth's core, and from then on she forced every remaining being on Earth to bow down to her as a god. Pretty insane, right? Highly recommend you check this story out for yourself. Amanda McKnight and I have been talking about it ever since I started here, and we would love to hear your thoughts on it too.